I'm going to show you how. Now, cherry trees are a very, very beautiful fruit. They're a very, very sweet fruit. They're a very, very classy fruit. You can use them in preserves, desserts. There's nothing better than a really big, plump, deep, deep red, ripe and ready to go cherry. And I tell you what, if you've ever had a decent cherry, you've got to be careful, because before you know it, it'll be snatched off you, because I tell you what, they're hard to come by, especially in the garden. And what's happened to me over the years, in fact anyone I know who lives in temperate climates has had a problem with people taking their cherries from them. You know, it's enough to really hurt your feelings, because I tell you what, these cherries don't last 2 minutes with the blooming wood pigeons. So if you're in a self-sufficient situation, you've got to make a decision here. Do you want to eat your cherries, or do you want to eat the wood pigeons? Well, I'm going to leave that to you. I personally don't really do the killing wood pigeons thing. I want to, I'm just not a very good shot. But, you know, I'm hoping in time, maybe I'll get there. You know, at the end of the day, you know, you can't spend all this time growing blimmin' cherry plants and not have any. But if you want to grow trees in the garden, one thing I will say is they are relatively problem free. That is probably the main problem in my eyes, is the birds taking them. Now they do get to, you know, 3 meters tall and above. So you really got to think. I mean, I've got dwarf varieties here, and there's many different types. You've got the classic Morello cherry, and you've got Stella, some of the popular ones in temperate climates. And they are very productive, you know, and you don't really have to worry too much about pollination with the cherry, because you can bet your bottom dollar you have got wild cherries. In fact, there's an ancient woodland about 400 meters just down the hill there, and there are some very, very big wild cherries there. So usually the fruiting of the cherries is not the problem, it's getting there before someone else does, or something else does, and that's probably going to be your biggest problem when growing cherries. Now, when growing cherries. So one of the things I've tried to do to mitigate this is I've got a chicken aviary, and I've tried to grow some dwarf ones in there and just heavily prune them. And I found actually I've had some decent results in there, but the problem is they just want to get big and outgrow the aviary. But if you can sort out some sort of a situation whereby you don't have problem with the birds, you can expect to harvest a lot of your cherries. I mean, I'm just seeing them getting picked off by the day here. This cherry tree that I've got here is now probably, I don't know, 15 years old, and it's quite diseased in the centre. It's still producing, so I'm still leaving it here, but they can get stressed and diseased, and this is one of the things, you know, with some of these modern cultivars, they produce well, but they get stressed. Now they are quite high yielding. Usually you want a free draining soil, a fertile soil as well. And one thing you really have to do with cherries is make sure they get a good bit of sun. You want full sun for cherries, there's no excuse. You should prune your cherry as well to make sure you've got that sun in the canopy, so you can ripen them berries, because some of the foliage of cherries can get quite full bodied. So, you know, you want a situation where you can harvest cherries and get as many cherries as you can out of one tree. Now, they are usually quite high yielding anyway. They do benefit from a slightly acidic soil, and I mean slightly, you know, not too much, but I've seen them growing alongside bracken, just on the hillside near bracken and places like that. So they're a tough plant, and they'll put up with a bit of acid as well. They're quite a wild plant, so they shouldn't be too much of a problem really. Now in summertime it's important to water them, and you know, really you should fertilise them when they're fruiting, just to get the most out of your cherry swelling, when the fruit's actually swelling. There's quite a lot of energy it takes to produce the cherries, so you know, if you can give it a little boost during the flowering and water during the fruiting, then you're going to find yourself with a much better cherry crop. Now cherries do grow better in a place where they receive a bit of cold weather for some of the year below 0 degrees. So this is the case with a few fruiting trees actually. Just try and, you know, if you're in too hot a climate, you might have a problem with them wanting to come into flower, because they like a situation where you're under 0 degrees for a certain amount of the year. So that shouldn't really be a problem, especially in temperate climates anyway. Now, if you're going to plant these guys, it really depends on what sort of soil you've got. If you've got heavy type soil, you're better off really planting them in the spring. If it's a heavy, damp soil, spring. But I mean, I always go with autumn sowing. You shouldn't really be planting these in boggy conditions anyway. So I would plant them in autumn. You get like a 1 meter whip type thing or a grafted tree. Get it in there in autumn, give it loads of good fertile soil so you get a good few years of growth, and try and keep your eye on it, try and prune it, and when you grow a cherry, try and grow a couple of different cherries and really try and plan your way out of having the problem of things coming to eat them, because I see it all the time, people growing cherries, they never get to eat a cherry. So that's the one fundamental thing I think you should really try and do. I mean, you can prune them up against the wall, maybe that's overkill. If you've got a decent system whereby you like to hunt, and you've got one in an exposed area, maybe that's not a bad option, you know. But overall, I would say they're a good tree. Once you've got them established, they will take care of themselves. Just try and get the berries before the birds do, whether it's an aviary system or you just design your ground properly or just have enough of them so that you can access them. But they're a great tree. They produce year after year, loads of fruit, loads of delicious desserts. So you're not going to say, didn't you? Get out there,